Hello, environmental science investigators, and welcome to another mini lesson. This time we are looking at species interactions. But first, think about these questions relative to yourself. What is your role in your home? What types of resources do you use on a daily basis? Where do you live? Who do you interact with the most? What types of relationships do you have? So, if I was describing you kind of in an ecological sense, all of this is describing your overall niche. A niche describes an organism's use of resources in its habitat and also looks at its role in the community. Remember, we already talked about roles, or maybe you haven't seen that video yet, but we went over roles of organisms in their communities. So a niche is looking at, where's this organism living within its habitat. So even within this shoreline, there are different types of habitats within the shoreline, kind of depending on where the organism can live, kind of depends on the organism itself. So of course, if a taller bird can be eating within this shallow end versus a, small one really can't. And also, where an organism can live within its habitat can also describe its, can also be based on its tolerance. So, its tolerance is describing the organism's ability for it to survive and reproduce under different environmental conditions. So, looking at here, tolerance of these different steelhead trout is looking at what kind of temperature range do most steelhead trout like to live at, where they can, reproduce and live and survive successfully. And so the best top, optimal zone or optimal temperature is between 13 and 21 degrees Celsius. And so there are different types of organisms that, again, have different tolerance levels, and they can also be divided into, where they can and cannot live. And we have specialists, and we also have generalists. So specialists, organisms that specialize, either living in different types of environments or very specific environments, or specialize eating very specific food sources. So this polar bears here are specialists, meaning they can only really live in this polar environment due to, the physical characteristics they have. It'd be very hard for them to live in a desert environment with this thick coat of fur. Pandas are also specialists that can only live in very certain types of habitats, very specific types of forests and climates, and also that grow their favorite, more specialized food source, which is bamboo. But there are a lot of organisms that can live in almost any different types of habitat and eat a wide variety of food sources. And we call these guys generalists. So, like raccoons, you probably see them in your trash can or roaming the street eating trash or eating, other things. Naturally, they don't eat just trash, but they eat all kinds of stuff also in their natural environment. They can get what they can. Same thing with coyotes as well. Rats, mice are another good example. So the interactions between species are also part of an organism's niche. And this is what we're going to be focusing on the second half of this lesson is looking at what kinds of interactions do species have with their environment and the organisms that live with it. Either plant organisms or even animal organisms, other animal organisms as well. And so these are the different types of interactions we're going to be looking at. So we have competition, we have predation, and we have a special kind of group of interactions called symbiotic relationships. And there's three main examples or three main types that we're going to look at. We have parasitism, mutualism, and also commensalism. But all these are different types of interactions that species may have within the environment. But again, this is a very specific type, which we'll go over in a second. All right. So competition, that's looking at the struggle of individuals to obtain a shared limiting resources. There's not endless amount of resource in the environment, and a lot of times some organisms feed on the same thing. And so there might be competition between them. And so not all competitors are created equal. Some competitors are going to come out being the more dominant competitor, stronger, more sneaky or whatever, or just whatever reason they're better able to get that resource. So those two species competing for the same resource can't really exist together. How are they going to be happily surviving in the same environment if they're trying to compete for the same limiting resource? What are they going to do? What should they do to help reduce that competition? So let's divide up the resources. And there are different ways that organisms can divide up those resources. There's not going to be like a mama bird around, like telling organisms how to do it, but they have different ways they divide them up. And that's called resource partitioning. When two species divide a resource based on different things, it could be based on differences in behavior, different times of the day. Dividing it up because they could be of different sizes. So they can only eat very specific sized resources. So let's go over different types of resource partitioning, different ways to divide up those resources. One way is by temporal resource partitioning. Temporal refers to time, whether it's, minutes, hours, days, months, whatever. But here, of course, we're looking at day. So they're using the same resource at different times of the day. And that way they're not coming across each other and they're able to equally access that resource. So for example, we have this watering hole in say in Africa, and these herd of elephants and herd of zebra use this watering hole at maybe different times of the day so they're not competing with each other. Then we have spatial resource partitioning, using different parts or areas of the same resource. So there can be, let's say, the same tree, for example, but different parts of the tree and using resources in different parts. So that's spatial resource partitioning. And then we have morphological resource partitioning. And so here, two species have evolved different, physical characteristics that allows them to maybe use the same resource in a different way. And so maybe they might be eating the same type of lizard, but maybe different sizes, or same type of mouse, but different sizes. All right. Then we have predation, when in one organism, the predator, is eating another organism, the prey, such as this lion jumping on the back of these wildebeest. And a lot of times, predators have a very important role in helping to regulate their prey population. So we actually see these cycles of predator and prey populations kind of almost cycling with each other. So, more often than not, there are going to be higher numbers of prey naturally in the environment versus the predators. And as we have increasing numbers of prey, we're also going to have increasing numbers of predator, because more prey, more predators around to eat them, and they're going to be happy, surviving, reproducing. But then, there's way too many predators around. And then there's going to be maybe a crash in that prey population, and we have a crash in the predator population as well. So we typically see this cycling where they almost mirror each other. With when one increases, the other increases. When one decreases, the other decreases. All right, now we get to those special kinds of species interactions, the symbiotic relationships. Here we have close and also long term interactions between two species, or maybe even more, in an ecosystem. First one is parasitism, where you have a parasite is depending on a host for nourishment, and they may live on the outside of that host or maybe even on the inside as well. And usually the host is harmed either physically on the outside, they're being eaten away, or inside, a lot of their nutrients are being stolen right from under them. Mutualism is where both species or more are benefiting. There's some kind of benefit on both sides. Here we have a crocodile that's getting their teeth cleaned by this bird. The bird gets a food source and the crocodile gets a free teeth cleaning. Here we have a honeybee obtaining nectar from this flower, but the flower is getting pollinated inevitably by that honeybee. They both benefit. The last one is commensalism, where one species benefit, the other one's like, meh, is neither being benefited nor harmed. It might not even know that it's even going on. All right, that's the end of this video here. Complete.